Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sally Berkery and I'm the Managing Director of CEW UK. You may recall that we ran the first in a series of sessions last month focusing on developing brands in the international stage. And to continue the conversation, we're turning our attention this morning specifically to China, a massive, powerful market with huge opportunity. And certainly this won't be the last of the sessions that we're going to be running on China. I am not the expert on this topic, and so this morning I'm delighted to welcome CMO Alison Bringer and VP of Marketing for APAC Elijah Whaley of global data and technology experts Launchmetrics, who are going to be taking a deep dive into the landscape of China with a closer look at understanding the Chinese market, the value of the Chinese social media platforms, and of course the importance of KOL marketing in reaching today's modern consumer. There will be time for questions at the end. We will be sharing the presentation to those who've attended. So please do pop any questions in the chat, Q&A panel rather than the chat. Sorry, I nearly messed that up. But without further ado, over to you, Alison.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having us this morning. Well, my morning, Elijah's afternoon, evening. I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen. That should be good. I think you guys should be able to see. Voila. So as Sally mentioned, today, Elijah and I like to kind of call this China 101. As I mentioned, I'm Alison Bringer, Chief Marketing Officer. Like you guys dialing in here, I'm in London, but Elijah actually is dialing in. I will let him share the special funny news.
Yeah, so I recently just got my COVID shots, so I thought I'd take them for a test run and went over to Wuhan. So I'm calling from Wuhan today.
But he typically does reside in China, so he didn't have to travel so far. We didn't send him on a plane from London and the Launchmetrics office here.
That's right, that's right.
So, you know, I thought this would be a great way to kind of start the conversation for today. And, you know, as Sally mentioned, this is going to be just a very laid back conversation. Elijah and I prepared some slides as kind of a talking kind of dialogue for you guys. And then at the end, make it more of an open Q&A, but feel free to kind of ping throughout the presentation if you have any questions. This is a conversation we've had numerous times with our clients. So hopefully you guys will find it as interesting and informative as they have. You know, one thing that especially in this kind of inter-pandemic or post-pandemic, no matter, depending on where you are in the world, one topic that keeps coming up that keeps the CEOs of the companies we work with up at night is, you know, how they're going to hit their revenue goals, which everyone always wants to know, you know, what is that special recipe? But what actually is more challenging for them is how do they stay relevant? Because that's actually how they will hit those revenue goals. Especially in the last, let's say, 18 months during the pandemic, one thing that has become crystal clear is that it's not just enough to have amazing products. Brands now need to think about, you know, how they create brand value, how do they connect with their audiences, with their consumer on a much more intangible level, because consumers now are looking for brands that align with their values, that they have things in common with. This was something that we used to just see in Gen Z or Gen Z and millennials, but now we're seeing it across the board for all generations. You know, the pandemic has really realigned people's expectations of brands. And because of that, brands are being challenged to, you know, put their money where their mouth is, I guess you could say, and make sure that the products that they're making, the practices that they're practicing are really in line with those that their consumers are demanding. And because of that, you know, this all has an impact on how brands are staying relevant, how they're creating equity, and how they're driving their brand performance. Even before the pandemic, we knew that brand equity was so important. It just was so hard to quantify. But things that we've seen in our research at Launchmetrics is that the brand itself can represent up to 50% of the value of a company. So if we look at the Drunk Elephant acquisition by Shiseido, we can see that Shiseido paid something more like 8 times more than the revenue. And it was really because what the brand Drunk Elephant represented for itself. And so for us at Launchmetrics, we're providing our customers with tools and data to help them understand their brand performance. We work with more than 1,000 brands in this space across fashion, luxury, and beauty around the world. As I mentioned, I'm here in London. Elijah is in China, but we have offices in New York, Paris, Milan, Madrid. And we're really working across these three industries to really dissect, how brands can make smarter decisions around their branding efforts. How we help our customers do this is we help them identify, we essentially provide them with one currency to measure all of their marketing activities and understand what's driving performance. How we do that is through our media impact value algorithm that assigns a monetary value, so let's say £1, to every post, interaction, or article. It allows them to understand, did this influencer campaign perform better than my PR strategy? As I launch this new product into the market, should I be leveraging my own media channels better, or perhaps celebrities are a better way to be creating awareness? So really understanding, what it is that works best and what needs to be improved. And most importantly, being able to benchmark those initiatives, those launches, those campaigns, those product performances against the industry standards. The lens at which we use media impact value to kind of monetize those activities and understand what's working and what's not is through our unique voice-centric framework. So at Launchmetrics, we believe that there are 5 voices that influence the consumer's path to purchase. So if you figure, if you're a big brand, you already have a lot of awareness. So you don't need to kind of think about just your celebrity and media strategy. Of course, with every launch, it's important because you need to create new awareness. But with smaller brands that are just getting started, everyone always flocks to influencers. But the truth is before you can get to that kind of consideration conversion phase, you need to let people know about your brand. So we believe celebrities and media are kind of that top of the funnel, creating the conversations around your brand. But then people like influencers and partners are key for legitimatizing your brand and creating that conversion. And most importantly, your owned media channel. So who better, I know this is a beauty seminar, but I love this phrase and it's something our CSO says all the time, but who better to buy a Rolex than someone who already owns a Rolex? It's much more cost effective to convert your existing customers than find new ones. So that's why, of course, at Launchmetrics, we're not just helping our customers analyze kind of the external parties that are creating value for their brand, but also those internal parties to the owned media voices that are driving that brand performance. So to kick off our conversation about the Chinese market, I'm going to do a very brief introduction, and then we're going to put Elijah in the hot seat for a deeper dive and then some Q&A. This should be no surprise, but across the fashion, luxury, and beauty space, we've seen that China has been the first market to recover. Obviously, they were able to contain the virus a lot better than most of the other markets in the world. And we've already seen specifically in fashion that sales in China have returned to pre-pandemic levels, and that already happened at the beginning of the year. So that's quite exciting for all of our businesses because it's a good indicator of what's to come in the West once things get under control. China will represent 50% of luxury consumers by 2025. This is not something new post-pandemic. I mean, we knew that this number was going to be something like 40%. We were estimating from research previous to the pandemic. That's only fueled and grown. And it'll be interesting to see how it continues to grow. And then, of course, for those of you that have already started to dabble in the Chinese market, about the third one, but that the Chinese beauty market's growth is set to outpace both the US, Western Europe, and Japan. So that means for all of us on this call today, there's a lot of opportunity. And it also means, though, that we really need to understand the market to build the right strategies to be part of that local growth. So this is quite interesting, I think, for Western marketers. In China, there are 2 times more touch points than what we are seeing in China. They're 2 times more touch points than what we're seeing in the Western markets. How the customers there kind of get social inspiration, how they confirm with friends and family. It's so different. They also have so many more platforms that Elijah is going to be talking about today. So, you can no longer go into this market and thinking, I'm an Instagram person, so I'm only going to focus on Instagram, or today TikTok's really big, so we're going to highly focus on TikTok. I mean, that just doesn't work in China because those channels don't even exist in China. So really understanding the landscape, understanding both the channels, but also what the customer journey looks like, and understanding that it looks nothing like it does here in the West is going to be key as you guys develop your strategies. A few data points, again, in that media impact value calculation that we have at Launchmetrics that I thought could be interesting as food for conversation. What we've already started to see is that the pandemic has created a clear shift in conversations when it comes to product categories. I guess most of you have seen this, but we've seen that there's been an increase by 23% in those conversations around skincare products. So this was H2 of 2020 last year, and we've only started to kind of start consolidating the H1 data from this year, but we're seeing that trend has continued to go, especially, as masks are still, well, not here in the UK, I guess, in London, yes. Elijah, just so you know, we had our Freedom Day yesterday. So allegedly, I think most places aren't supposed to be required to wear masks. But to be fair, I'm not 100% sure on the new rules. So anyone dialing in, do not follow my guidelines. But as masks have become kind of a thing everywhere, skincare, of course, is even more important because your face is covered all day. So those conversations have already increased and continuing to maintain that increase. And then makeup levels had decreased, but I'm sure we'll start to see a resurgence of that as things open up. And as no one's been buying makeup for a year and, needs to get summer ready. The other thing that's been really interesting too is, as I said in the data before, we already knew China was growing and going to be quite key for our brands, but with their reopening and their ability to kind of bounce back to pre-pandemic revenues before anyone else, it just, solidifies why China is so important. And here's just another data point that reminds you how important it is to have a China first strategy when you're trying to attack the local market. We can see, just looking across 2020, that there was a spike of 90% in conversations when brands were targeting the Chinese market by the end of last year. So it just reminds us too, like, if you want to be in the market, you need to understand what your strategy is going to be to create that local approach, to create that conversation, because there are so many brands already kind of entering into that market. And you don't want to be, just a number. You want to actually make an impact. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Elijah. Maybe actually Elijah too, we should have done this at the beginning, but maybe to put you in the hot seat, because these aren't our customers and they don't know you, could just give a little kind of overview. Obviously, we didn't say this before, but Elijah comes from a company that we acquired, Launchmetrics acquired in October, November last year, that's based in Shanghai, and he was the chief marketing officer there. But maybe you could speak a little bit why you have this amazing American accent living in China, and your experience there, and then we can jump into the slides.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good Midwestern accent. Yeah, I'm originally from the American Midwest, and I came out to China permanently in 2013. I had been here for a year or so before. And really early on, I started working with KOLs. I eventually founded a KOL, and she turned into one of the bigger beauty influencers in the country, and then joined Park Lu in early 2017. And so kind of saw their growth story from kind of early zero to acquisition. And so I've really gotten to see the KOL industry from both sides, being an influencer and creating content and collaborating with brands, to the data side and brands collaborating with KOLs. And so I think I have a balanced mix on understanding what the industry, how it really works, and how brands can leverage KOLs to maximize results.
Great.
So with that, I'm excited to tell you about platforms and KOLs. I'll start with a little bit of the main ecosystem that we have here. to kind of hopefully make a little bit of sense of it for you. WeChat, if you're not familiar with it, is considered the super app of China. It's almost an OS. So I can pay my utility bills and my doctor bills, and I can call a cab and call my girlfriend and text my boss all from WeChat. And so it's become this really kind of center for getting things done in China. And because of that, it has a little bit more of a customer centric approach for brands. So it's used a little bit more like a CRM today by brands. And even from a MIV perspective for us, it only ranks number 3 as far as its value when brands are using it for campaigns. It's not an extremely influential platform when it comes to the actual buyer's journey. There are some dynamics that are changing on the platform when it comes to things like mini programs, which are kind of like apps within an app, and also what they're doing with kind of stores and content. So the second one is Douyin, which a lot of you probably know as TikTok internationally. TikTok or Douyin is an interesting platform because I think, as you all might know, I think it just reached 3 billion downloads globally, which is surpasses or puts it in one of those ranges of the YouTube or Instagram kind of category. So it's absolutely massive, and it's just as massive here. It is another, well, we have this term walled gardens. So WeChat is created by Tencent, Douyin's created by a company called ByteDance, and Weibo, which we'll talk about in a moment, is created by Alibaba. And each one of these apps don't communicate with each other. So you can't send users from one application to another application. And that means their payments, it means their e-commerce, it means everything. And so Douyin is one of these really interesting platforms. We all know is a short video platform, but in China, it's far more than that. It already has a payment system. It also has mini programs, so apps within apps and stores. And so they are really working on, and I personally have friends that work at ByteDance, and really their goal is to turn this into a video storefront. And they want to be an e-commerce contender. They see this content to commerce trend as being very significant, and that's where a lot of their energy is focused. Weibo continues to be, actually, as an MIV value creation platform, it's ranked number 1. It continues to be extremely significant when it comes to influencing kind of this prime age of fashion, luxury, and beauty buyers. And one of the reasons why is because it's one of the main communication channels for celebrity gossip. And we just had a big deal blow up over here. One of our major celebrities, who's an actor and a singer, he had some, unfortunately, kind of Me Too type of scandal with a young lady and some young ladies. Quite unfortunate. However, it's one of the reasons why people go to Weibo, is because this is where they get that type of information, and they get to hear all the gossip and learn about that and contribute to that. Bilibili is really interesting. This is one of my favorite and I think most interesting platforms because it has become China's YouTube. It had double-digit growth, it literally doubled its users in 2020 during the COVID incident. And so it used to be an anime type of platform where people would just go for comics and gaming and anime type of content. And now it's become much broader, where it has fashion and beauty, and it's a long form video platform. So that's what makes it like YouTube. But it has, one of the interesting things is it's really a place to learn about China's youth and how they are changing and how different they are than previous generations. We see, like in the beauty category, some of the main leaders of content creation and influencers are kind of the gender fluid males who their history actually comes from doing makeup as anime characters. And then these women would say, hey man, these guys are amazing at doing cosmetics for these anime characters. I want to learn how to do that kind of on my myself, maybe a tamed down version or something, but the evolution of the platform is extremely interesting. And then Xiaohongshu is a little red book, or you see this last one called Red. It's also a very interesting platform. As far as user growth, it's really plateaued for several years now. It's got about 100 million registered users, but with a really important niche, this kind of 18 to 35-year-old females, it is the platform to go to check out cosmetics and fashion and travel and even sometimes food in restaurants before making a purchase decision. And we even see that it's one of the touch points that happens in the buyer's journey. And even though there's stores on the platform and a payment system, it's typically purchases aren't made through the platform, but they're made on like a Taobao or a Tmall. But this is going to be one of the stops in that buyer's journey, which makes it really interesting. Next slide, please. One of the things to really, that's maybe a little bit complicated to understand about the applications here is that functionally they're all the same. So whether it's TikTok or Douyin or Weibo or WeChat or Xiaohongshu, they all have the ability to communicate with individual users. They all have content, they all have commerce, and they all have payments. So functionally, they're all the same. And really what we understand from that and what that means though is when brands are trying to create content and trying to influence users on the platforms, it's not about what the content or what you can post or what should be on there, but trying to understand what is the user intentionality when accessing an application. So what value are they trying to extract from that engagement? And we know, like, and probably you experience this yourself with TikTok or Douyin over here, that this is somewhere where you go to waste time. Maybe you watch your kids waste time. It is an absolutely mindless platform where content is very short. It's meant to catch your attention, and it doesn't necessarily, provide a lot of maybe prefrontal cortex cognitive value, but it gives you that really nice dopamine hit. And so we know when brands go onto the platform, it's not about maybe trying to educate, it's not about trying to inform, but it's trying to entertain. And so it has this very, very strong entertainment value side. We kind of see that same thing on Bilibili. We see a lot of that maybe on a Weibo type of platform. And then the other end of that extreme is WeChat, where people are going on there as a high utility application. They're trying to extract value from it by communicating with people, making payments, helping improve their lives in ways, and very intentional in that. And so this is why we see a lot of brands using it as a CRM, because it's actually a place where customers will maybe reach out to the brand and say, hey, my product has some sort of defect, or a place where they will have a referral program or loyalty program kind of thing. And so WeChat kind of plays that role. And that's one of the reasons why we don't see campaigns necessarily providing as much value for brands as, say, some more viral platforms. The really interesting one, and the one that strikes this really nice balance, is Little Red Book. And this lies in that range of valuable entertainment that informs decision-making. And so on the application, we'll see a lot of brands leveraging smaller influencers or even KOCs, key opinion customers. So those people that buy products and then post and talk about their purchases that end up influencing other people's buyers' behavior. And so the content on here, when launching campaigns on here, should be much more genuine and much more aligned with trying to make informative content interesting. Next slide. So one of the things that's kind of hard, I think, sometimes for Western people come from Europe and America and other parts outside of Asia is the why do these Chinese customers have such an affinity for KOLs, and why is this such an important part of the buyer's journey? And it actually goes down to some kind of baseline psychology around understanding a high context culture, which China is a high context culture, meaning they need a lot of information to make purchase decisions. As Allison mentioned, this kind of 8 brand touch points before making a purchase decision. And then also this relationship-based culture. And if you've ever read a book about China, or if you've ever visited or have a friend from Asia, you might know that they have a very strong gifting culture. So when you meet someone maybe important, someone like a business partner, or for me, my girlfriend's parents for the first time, you're going to give them a gift. And one of the reasons why they give gifts is because this is a form of trying to build a relationship with someone through reciprocity. And so they have this strong reciprocity, gift giving and gift receiving and gift giving behavior among family and friends and acquaintances and business partners. Well, the really interesting thing we've identified is that content is a gift. Just like this webinar is right now. Allison and I are spending our time, and there's been coordination between our partners and creating these slides. There's been, some blood, sweat, and maybe tears poured into the effort that goes behind creating content. And that's a gift that we're giving to you to try and build affinity with you in the future. And then hopefully, you'll understand how wonderful Launchmetrics is and come be a customer. And the idea behind this in Chinese culture, though, with KOLs is that they're creating tons of content and giving it to their audience as a gift. And the audience is only able to repay through likes, reposts, and comments. And so as they build up these large storehouses of reciprocity value with their followers, eventually when they go to sell a brand's product, they can kind of transact on that. And so these recommendations become an extremely powerful way of audiences being able to pay back KOLs for all of the value that they've provided them. And then also when you think about rings of influence and a strong culture of community and such like that, it's really more impact. We see more impact from influencers in China or Asian countries than we do anywhere else. And it's kind of based in this kind of relationship-based culture that's quite interesting. Next slide, please. So maybe some little tactics here or things to think about trend-wise. So in China, what we've seen, and this has been really interesting, we just released a 618 report, which June 18th is China's second largest sales festival. From last month. And as we release this report and analyze this report, what was really interesting is seeing international brands are really starting to adopt local strategies. And one of them is this private traffic strategy. And private traffic is the idea of taking your customers off of main social media platforms, like say a Douyin, TikTok, Xiaohongshu, and putting them into private chat channels on something like a WeChat, where the brand has direct communication with the customers and can have free flow of conversations, and also the customers themselves can free flow converse with each other. And this has become a very powerful strategy in the country, and something that we kind of didn't think was going to happen, just because we had a lot of the big brands tell us early on that this was too local of a strategy. They weren't going to take this on. And now they've really adopted it because a lot of local brands have figured out that it works so well. The next one is this idea of tapping into immersive experiences. You might be seeing this also in the West, but it's definitely very prevalent here. And that's kind of the realization that the voice of the customers can have significant impact on the buying behavior of their friends and family and close connections. And so if brands can create brand touch points that compel their customers to capture and share brand experiences, they can leverage that to have significant impact on their voice to those friends and family, and to purchase behavior from friends and family of customers. And so what we're seeing is this really big rise in importance of KOCs, these key opinion customers. And so brands are creating immersive experiences that compel people to capture and share, and then identifying customers who have a significant outweighed impact on buying behaviors of others, and then aggregating those into some of these private traffic channels and leveraging them in the future for other campaigns. And so it's kind of like creating a decentralized marketing initiatives through your customers. And it's quite interesting. It's quite local again, and something that I think eventually we'll see everywhere because it is such an impactful strategy. Then the other one is we saw this huge boom in short videos, and especially live streaming, especially e-commerce live streaming in China last year due to COVID. And it really hasn't gone on to the decline. E-commerce live streams have just become a really important part of doing any type of sales in China. I think it's still quite low. It accounts maybe for, overall, it might only account for 5 to 10% of e-commerce retail. But in certain sectors like beauty or fashion, it can come up to like 25%, especially during a sales campaign period. And it's just very important. And that's because user behavior, buyer's journey behavior has changed so significantly. And people in Asia or in China specifically really like this kind of communal watching a live stream, commenting, seeing real interactions with products. And then obviously these are all driven by massive sales. And so they want to tap into that sales opportunity. Next slide, please. All right, time for some Q&A.
Yeah, I'm gonna just go ahead and shut off the share screen.
Sure.
So maybe I could start with the audience question that we got, and then we have a few other questions too as conversation starters. But the first one is, do you have any advice for finding the right influencers to align with, work with, if you are new to the Chinese market?
Yes, my advice is to use a really great tool, and one that has a curated database. So at Parklu, this is one of the things that we've been doing for a long time, and that is going into platforms, using a curated approach, so using data to try and analyze which KOLs are going to have the most impact for brands, and adding those into a searchable database, one that layers in analytics and our own proprietary algorithms, and then providing an end-to-end campaign solution. So that is the shortcut. That is the easy way. And that is, from my opinion, the best way because it's so data-driven. And then you're getting the benefit of other people that have run campaigns with them and all the past knowledge that a company like ours has. If not, then this is the way that people have done it for a long time. It's a hard grind. You have to go on there and you have to try and identify KOLs that are potentially have your type of brand image or communication strategy in mind. And the difficult part about choosing a KOL based upon what they look and talk about is that you're actually not looking at the audience a lot of times. And so one of the things that we do with data is we say, hey, when a KOL sends out a post, they get an average of likes and engagements. But we can consider this an average, but when they talk about a certain brand, or when they talk about a certain keyword, we can say, oh, when they talk about these types of subjects, they have higher engagement rates than their average. Or if they talk about one that has lower engagement rates than average, then we know that's an indication not of the KOL or their ability or what they like to talk about, but it's an indication of what works with that audience. And that's what's kind of tough if you're not using data to make that decision.
Nicola, I see you have a question, but I'm going to come back to that. I want to just start with a few more generic ones, and then we can get into the specifics. But maybe, Elijah, I know one thing that everyone always asks you is, what's the biggest mistake brands make when entering the Chinese market?
Well, China has become extremely competitive. I kind of less than jokingly say that the next decade is going to be the decade of Chinese brands. I think it's not just Chinese brands in China, but Chinese brands around the world. We'll see that when Shein goes public later this year. The reality is that it's a little bit like construction. Way back in the day, I used to work construction, where you kind of double the time and triple the cost. And so it's a hard market to make it in. And if you're not using data, you're way behind the curve. You need to have data partners to be able to help you identify where is the right place and the right decisions for you to make for your brand. And that's that idea of that right voice, right channel, right audience. For us is what is most important in our help with brands. And so that's really the best approach that I can make and suggest for anyone, is leveraging data, because it is so big. There are so many potential decisions you could make. There's so many channels that you can go on, and there are, unfortunately, more sad stories of brands trying to launch in China than there are success stories. And I think one of the big differentiators is the use of data.
I think off the back of that, and actually my question will then lead to Nicola's question after, but what do you think is the most important marketing tactic that brands should be considering to leverage in this market?
They have to go local. I mean, I think that that's one of the things that all of these local brands are really bringing to the limelight for everybody operating here, is that the Chinese are have very unique characteristics and buyer's behavior, and you have to align with that. They have special expectations and special needs. When I go deeper down the rabbit hole, when it goes to something very, very tactical, I think the most interesting thing to me is the idea of KOCs. I think that this idea of leveraging, I personally kind of have the statement of retention is the best awareness strategy. And so if you can keep a customer and you can get a customer talking about you, then you have a really, really good chance of succeeding in a high context, high relationship based culture. And so that's where, again, you really need that data, though, to be able to understand not just that if your customers are talking about you, but which are the ones that are really valuable to your brand and how can you leverage them continually moving forward.
That's quite interesting, because even in the West, one of the big data trends that we're seeing, especially kind of with influencers, is that it's less about acquisition these days and more about retention as well. So not only are brands kind of keen to understand how they can retain their customers, but how they can retain influencers and kind of continue that conversation season after season. So Nicola's question, like kind of on the bat of the KOL thing, is can you run through the private traffic from KOL to KOC again and how that would work for a brand?
Sure. So actually the private traffic thing started with KOLs. They were the ones who initiated this. So I'll kind of give that context first, because maybe that'll help explain it. So we have the concept in an influencer community of super fans. And what that means is you identify people maybe on your Instagram who every single time you post, they comment, they like everything, they repost, they just love you. Well, if you can identify these people and take them off of Instagram and maybe put them into a private, Facebook chat group, or put them into a sorry, I don't use the application, WhatsApp group. If you can put them into one of those groups, that's what we consider a private traffic channel. And the value of being able to do this is putting them in that private traffic channel for KOLs allows them to directly communicate with those customers. And we have, a little math algorithm here that says you only need 1,000 real fans or super fans, because if you have 1,000 super fans and each one of them gives you $100, that's $100,000. And for most people, $100,000 is a pretty good yearly income. And so the same concept can be true for brands. And it's the idea of identifying customers who not only are loyal, but are advocates. And funneling them into these private traffic channels where you can directly communicate with them, and then you can start to use them as a marketing or communications or some sort of branding amplification tool. And the really cool thing about it is they're so much more genuine. They're it couldn't be more authentic. They're customers, and the people that they talk to are their family and friends. And that's who they have real influence over. But if you also understand how the algorithms on applications like TikTok and Xiaohongshu are working today, there is a huge advantage over creating massive amounts of content opposed to creating really, really great single piece of content. And the reason why is because the algorithms favor virality. And it's very, very hard to manufacture virality. And so the best way to potentially hit on virality is to have as many people making as much content for your brand as possible. And the best way to do that is not to pay everyone, not to pay every KOL, but to leverage KOCs in very interesting and creative ways to create content for your brand that can create potentially viral content. And we've seen the rewards that come from this.
Great. And I just resolved a comment, but maybe Elijah didn't answer it because I didn't understand, but someone just wrote and KOC. So if that was you, if you want to resend your question, if we didn't answer it, please let us know. Also, I thought of something that you said earlier. If you haven't had too much Launchmetrics today, Elijah is live again in a few hours, hosting actually a LinkedIn Live to present the data from this 618 report. It's got some interesting L'Oreal data and some other beauty brands. So if you were interested in that, if you just go to the Launchmetrics LinkedIn, there's actually a sign up button on our page, or stalk Elijah on LinkedIn, and you'll be able to see it, or you can look, I'm attending as well, so you could find it through my LinkedIn. Maybe one more question, and then of course the KOC question person, if you have an additional one more question, we can do yours too. But maybe Elijah, one thing as kind of like a takeaway for them, but I guess it's overwhelming thinking about like all the different social platforms. Like I think they're way more than 5. And even here we say focus on 5. But do you think that these people dialing in today that are just launching into China really need to be on all of those, or, which should they focus on first?
Yeah, so, the reality is a lot of brands' tactics or strategies around this is going to be kind of contained or guided by whatever e-commerce sales channel they've chosen. So if you're on, I mentioned this a little bit before, if you're on Tmall, that is controlled by Alibaba, which has a walled garden of applications that you can freely kind of send traffic from. And so Alibaba's an investor in Little Red Book, so you can actually benefit from creating traffic and interaction and awareness on Little Red Book. So that's a really great strategy for you to use if you're on Tmall. Where if you've chosen to create a store on WeChat through a mini program, then you'll need to stay within the Tencent ecosystem of applications, which really, really the main one is going to be WeChat itself. But you wouldn't have a Tmall store and try and run a campaign on WeChat because there's no connector between these two. Unfortunately, if someone is aware and learns about your brand and says, "Oh, I want to buy that thing," they are going to have to log off of WeChat, open up Tmall and search for your brand, which, all of us are quite aware of, what that means. Every time you get someone to click on something, for some reason, there's like 50% of people just drop off because that click is too much. And so you can imagine how much loss there potentially is when you're moving from one application to another application and then having to search for a brand or a product. It's just too difficult. So your strategy is going to be driven, your marketing or awareness strategy is going to be driven by whatever e-commerce platform you've chosen.
Perfect. Well, I think that's all the time we have today. It was really a pleasure, Sally, being here. Thank you so much for having Elijah and I, and hopefully we will meet everyone someday in person. I know you said you guys just started to get back to live events, so we can do a China 2.0 in person next time. And Elijah will fly over from Wuhan if he's allowed to leave the country.
Fantastic. Thank you both. I honestly was just absolutely fascinating. It's great to have a real understanding of the different social platforms and explain so brilliantly, Elijah. So thank you so much for that. I'm sure there will be more questions. I know we're going to be doing lots more events around China because it is such a big topic, and it's, you know, quite daunting for brands that are looking to enter there. And as you say, it has to be right. You've got to get it right. There's one shot. So yeah, I mean, thank you so much. It was brilliant. If you have any questions afterwards, anybody who's joined us, please let us know. We can pass those on, and we will definitely be sharing further information with all of our attendees after the session. We're also recording, so give us a day or two and we will be editing it, so you'll be able to watch it again on our YouTube channel. A bit of housekeeping from me. We've got another event later this week. So on Thursday at 4 p.m, we are welcoming Spring Studios, who are going to be running a session about how to communicate sustainability in the age of greenwashing. And as part of that, we're welcoming Sarah Brown, who's the founder of Pi Skincare, and Arnaud Marcel, who is the CEO of Ren. And they're going to be chatting with Sarah Jossel, who is the beauty director of Sunday Times Star. So if you have some time at 4 p.m. on Thursday, do join us. You can find information about how to register on the CW site. One final piece of housekeeping, the team would kill me if I didn't mention, is that votes are obviously flooding in for our 16th annual beauty awards. The votes are open, I think, for the next couple of weeks. So if you haven't yet had a chance to vote, please do so. The finalists will be announced in August, and of course the winners will be announced at our hopefully face-to-face big event on 24th of September. But for now, thank you very much indeed. Lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you soon.